patience. We'll be starting the moment.
Recording in progress.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. I think we're slightly short of a quorum, but hopefully that will be resolved by the time we get to doing any official business. In the meanwhile, and Susie, if you would be so kind as to start us with the roll call, if you please.
Okay, Emmett Hopkins. He's not here. Alex Goodman.
Here.
Joshua Somin.
Yes, thank you.
Kenna Lee. Oh, I see her online there.
Yes, remote.
Lisa Pierce.
Here.
Zeno Swetjink.
Here.
And Sandra Maurer.
I'm here.
And Diana Rich is not here. And neither is Deborah Burns.
Can you tell us how many members we have officially at this point? I know there was a bit of a rotation turnover. And
Give me one moment. Pull you up here.
I think I got to leave at 4:15 today, just a heads up.
okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Alex. I ask in part because I'm pretty sure Debbie has been signed out for a while, so I don't think she counts officially anymore.
I heard she wanted to be the planning commission liaison instead of Everett.
Oh, uh-huh.
So we'll have to confirm that though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, let's see how it goes. All right. Well, again, folks, thanks for being here. Welcome to the new year of climate action. Woohoo. You can see we're all really raring to get going here. So without further ado, our primary action item from the previous meeting, which is to say in December, was about working groups to double check the information on the website in terms of current contact and membership. So just a reminder in case you somehow haven't done that, have a double check on the website. If there's anything that's not quite correct about working group membership or point of contact there, be sure to inform Susie and John before we get too much further into the new season. At this time, are there any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda at today's meeting? Not seeing anything present or online. So moving along, next up would be the planning department report.
So a few things that happened earlier today at 1 o'clock. We had our public arts committee meeting, and they're debating the South Entry sculpture call. If you guys are interested in public art, you can check their meeting page where they have all the submissions. And they didn't come to a decision today. They may be deciding in the next meeting in March. So you can stay tuned to see what art is going to be put there. And we also have a new member for the Climate Action Committee, Phil Carter, if you haven't heard yet. So congratulations to Phil. He's not here. And we also have news about the new SCTA appointee, which is Gavin Waters. Not it.
All right. Thanks for that, Susie. Next up, I believe, would be city council reports. What have we on that front?
Just a few items. The city recently changed from having detailed minutes to action minutes. I don't know if this will affect this group or not, but there will be the videos online still that will be retained for 3 or more years. And as was just mentioned, we appointed Philip Carter to this group and Gavin Waters to be on the SCTA Bike and Pedestrian Committee. And that was tough because there were 3 applicants for one position, and Philip, all 3 of them were great. So it was just that we had to decide which one. And so it seemed like it would be better to have 2 people involved rather than just the same person. So, but all 3 of them were really great and would have been great at the position. So, and then if anyone had noticed and wondered about Ives Park, they completed an ADA path in the park, and they put, it looks like kind of a small road right down the middle of the lawn area in front of the stage. And so people had asked me, why did they do that? And so the engineer said that they were trying to avoid tree roots, which was in one of the paths. And then the other reason is there's a sewer manhole in the middle of the yard there, and they had difficulty accessing it. And so that's why they have that path right in the middle of the lawn. And I'm hoping that people will still just, enjoy the stage and lawn area, even though there's a road right in the middle of it. We approved, at the last council meeting, we approved the AmeriCorps Trail, which is a trail in the Laguna that's going to link up to some of the trails right here behind the community center. And this was a $55,000 additional cost because of some environmental studies that did not happen that were required. And so I was really pleased that they approved that. And we also retained the Zoom meetings. So this had been on the agenda twice. And this time, the staff had done a lot of research on how to make those Zoom meetings safer. And so there's better security protocols. And staff actually recommended that we keep the hybrid Zoom in-person meetings. So that was approved. And I have a new committee assignment for the Russian River Water Association Board, and I was briefed on that and got to understand what they do. And I think it fits nicely what this climate action work is. And I'm also still primary for the Zero Waste Board and for the Budget Committee, but also primary liaison to Sustainable Arts. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilmember Moore. All right. Any other questions or comments so far? Alex, please.
I just have a clarifying question with the Zoom meetings. So I guess with Kenna, there's still a Brown Act situation or where we can't, if we're on Zoom, we can't vote. So we're not technically present. I guess that would answer my question with Kenna today. So never mind.
I think the Zoom counts for participation.
So I was told that if there's a just cause or an emergency reason, then they are allowed to vote online. But if you run out of those, then you could just just watch.
Right, and I think there has to be some kind of a statement by the person online to state why they cannot be. There's kind of some rules around what you have to say, and then we'd have to approve of it, and then it's as if they were here. So there's a little bit of protocol around it. Yeah.
On that front, if I'm understanding it correctly, I think our committee membership is down to 9 or possibly 10 people. If we have the 5 of us included here, then we have Kenna, Emmett, Diana, and Phil. 5 plus 4 would make 9, which means quorum is 5. Given that Debbie hasn't attended and probably
11.
who? So we have 5 here. We have 4 absent.
No, I think that's 11. Phil is a member.
That includes Phil.
And I found you on the list. Everett, planning direction.
What about Ambrosia?
Ambrosia, good point. Yeah, she wasn't listed there. Ambrosia's on there. I don't think Everett has been on for a while.
As the chair of the planning commission.
He hasn't been here for,
Ex officio, a member of this committee.
He was to be the liaison.
If you
Not-
look online, you see that.
He's not on the planning commission anymore.
Yeah, so et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ambrosia. And Debbie hasn't attended probably the last 5 or 6 meetings and said that she was withdrawing for personal reasons back in the fall. So
Yeah.
I believe that we're in a position with 5 to call that a quorum as far as transcending big business today. We can check in with the folks online, but my understanding of just our simple head count would be that I think we're close enough for today. All right, thank you. Unless there's any other questions or points on that, we're moving on to our regular agenda for today's meeting. The first item there is working group status reports.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
So who on the city council is representing Sebastopol on the board of directors of the Conservation Authority? Because the mayor used to do that.
I
Is she still continuing?
No,
that?
well, the mayor is no longer the mayor, but it's still Nisa Hinton. It's Nisa Hinton,
And so,
but she's just a council member now because Diana's the mayor.
yeah.
Hey, Phil.
All right, thanks, folks. We're definitely a quorum now. Hey, Phil, good to see you. And welcome, by the way. We already announced that you're all official these days, and we're very glad to have you. So, yes, appreciate you being here. All right, so our first item on the regular agenda is working group status reports for activities not on the agenda. Isn't it funny how that works out? On the sequestration working group front, just a quick report. The tentative dates for the Springs compost events are Saturday, April 6th, so first Saturday in April, and Saturday, May 11th, so second Saturday in May. Just a quick update on that. As most of you are aware, Dina was kind of the instigator and heart of the compost event. I certainly have my active role and will be continuing that. It does take, ideally 3 or 4 people to sort of manage flows at the compost events between the cars and then the people in the pile and that sort of thing. I will be putting out a call to the general list of people who like to know when the compost events happen. I do expect to get some help that way. But if anybody here would feel inclined to show up that day and volunteer even for half the time, that would be great. Just try to let me know in the next while. Again, we're a couple of months out, and those dates are not bulletproof confirmed, but I've sort of shopped them out to Public Works and the other relevant authorities, and I think they're likely to settle on that. Yes.
Telling that group that they would get extra compost for cooking.
I'm not honestly sure how we would make that happen, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, any other working group general announcements or things that we should know about? Yes, please.
Because I'm on the Zero Waste Board, I found out that there are 5 or 6 other jurisdictions that have year-round compost giveaways. So I inquired about this for Sebastopol, and I wrote to Zinzi, who's part of Zero Waste, and I was told. So then I wrote to the Public Works Director, Dante, and asked if there was anywhere in Sebastopol that we could do this. And the only place he thought was really feasible was here, but we know that's floodplain, right? So, but he suggested that we could do it for possibly half a year.
By
Like-
which you mean that there would just be a pile there that
Yes.
was refilled periodically? and
I
people
think
would
that
come get
that's the way
whenever?
it is, yeah. And I don't know everything about this, but so where it stands right now is Dante has confirmed, he said he would feel confident that the area could be used from March until November without worry. And then, so I wrote back and I asked everyone who I was writing to here if there were any other considerations that needed addressing. And then also, is there any cost to the city to host a permanent site, even if it's half year? But I haven't heard back from anybody. So I just wanted to give you that update.
Okay, that is an interesting question. As the sole coordinator of the event, I would really appreciate being in the loop on such considerations because there are significant logistics that do arise with running the event. Traffic flow being one of them, but just sort of maintenance of it being another. That area does have a tendency to collect trash and miscellaneous unregulated traffic and that sort of thing through there. Our agreement with Public Works so far has been that they didn't really want the pile to linger indefinitely. So we do a push with the idea that the pile is moved out fairly quickly within a few days or within a week. If it sits around for a long time and gets rained on, for instance, it becomes a much uglier mess to
Yeah.
deal with. And,
Okay.
once weeds start seeding it, that becomes a thing. So I personally, from a logistical standpoint, I would suggest that there are issues to consider, at least before moving to that sort of format.
Okay, I'll put you in the loop with all this.
Great, thank you. Any other working group reports? Yes, please, Alex.
So just confirming this is not on the agenda, right? Okay. We're working to coordinate with Bayren to do a workshop. For some reason, the library had declined the invite for them to present. For whatever reason, I'm not totally sure. Maybe just logistics or parking or something. I don't know. Maybe the library is worried. So anyway, we just need a location for the workshop, and we obviously held it in the green room for what we did the engagement series last year. Is that right? So thinking about using that, or I'm sure we could get it back at the library. I know there's the livery is also option, but in terms of this meeting, we would just have to inquire about public spaces, So I guess maybe the planning team over here would be a good person to ask. I know last year we just asked, and we asked really nicely if we could use the green room, and they said yes. So should we email you and just try to inquire if that or a few other places is available, and then we can narrow down some dates? Okay. And Bayren's going to handle most of the stuff, but we're going to obviously promote it through the newsletter and that kind of thing. So hopefully be a good partnership. And Bayren is full of lots of information and grants and stuff for homeowners. So they kind of have their own spiel. It's going to be your energy efficient and resilient home workshop. That's their theme that they're doing right now. So we'll see what happens, but that's all I have to report, I guess, from the education group.
Thanks very much, Alex. So just to feed it back to you to make sure I got it. So Bayren is essentially providing the content. We're just looking for a space so we can get a timeline.
Yeah, we're gonna just help them get the space locked down in Sebastopol, and then we'll help do outreach and just let people know.
Okay, great. Do you have an aspirational timeline on that, or is that to be determined based on
Space availability.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I'll email you.
I had a question, Alex. Is this water, electricity? What energy is involved here?
Hold on, let me read what it says again. Excuse me. Your energy efficient and resilient home workshop.
And are we working with the energy working group on this, or?
We could. We're just trying to help hold the event. So you guys we're welcome to collaborate in whatever way we need to. I mean, it's more Bayren's content. So, we're just trying to host and continue to bring educational content. And Bayren was somebody we wanted to get because they just have so much good information. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, it was just more. We were initially going to try to get them to partner with Carbon Conversations, but since they didn't see it fitting in their spring agenda, so we'll just host our own. I don't know if that's answering your question. But.
Well, maybe you can talk about this. But my understanding is that the energy working group is preparing an action plan that comes out of the online investigation. What's the need in the town? So it would fit in some way with that.
I think it'd be a great idea. I would encourage that we also look at bringing in the county's climate action and resiliency division. I think they're the most feet on the ground here in the county with awareness of the incentives and programs. They incorporate Bayren's stuff and Sonoma Clean
That's exactly
Powers.
who it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's the county's climate action and resilience? Okay.
Christine and Dory.
Excellent.
Yep.
Great to hear.
Yep.
Good job, Alex.
Yeah. I'm really happy you're doing this.
Is it working? The light isn't working, so.
I think you're good.
Hit it again? There it is. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for getting this going. And that's exactly the group that they do a great presentation. They really know their stuff. So we'd be happy to work with you in any way. It would be great if we could get, we have a lot of emails now from people who've signed up for more information. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Any other working group
Yeah,
related topics?
transportation.
Uh-huh.
So we hope to bring the resolution about Vision Zero to this committee in March.
Okay.
I attended a meeting, a quarterly meeting of Vision Zero, Sonoma County wide. And there was a presentation about that dashboard where they have a map of the county and kind of lay out where are the hazardous spots, where have the accidents been. And we got a list of metrics that they want to follow systematically. And I volunteered to take that on initially, liaison here with the city and other groups like the bicycle group to try to get that going, and then we can see where that can be housed more permanently.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on that front? I believe we're done. Thanks, everyone, for keeping things going. Our item B, we have addressed to a certain extent, which was just checking up on committee membership on turnover and recruitment. As I think we all know, Sunali and Dina are retiring. Phil is new. If I could ask for the planning department to check in on Debbie's status, because we have noticed from a facilitation standpoint that the liaison, the liaison position between the planning commission and this committee has been absent largely for the last year. I mean, whoever it was has not been coming much and has not been liaising, if you will. And we are being given advice to integrate more closely with the planning department and the planning commission. So it's hard for us to do that if our only intermediary is support staff here. So if we could get some clarity as to whether Debbie is still considered an official member, if so, if she could please start coming again, even if, it's only going to be a Zoom version. I believe the in-person was one of the sticking points for her previously. So we would just, it would help us to get clarity on who exactly in the membership is and what connections, if any, we have active with the Planning Commission. So thanks very much for that. All right, our next item on today's agenda is item C from the energy. Uh-huh.
So is Deborah still on this committee or no?
That's what I'm asking. I haven't seen her in a long time. She
But
said
it
she was
seemed that her
withdrawing.
term was at the end of the last December.
I believe she would have had to reapply. We got a note from her saying she could no longer do committee duties as of last September or
No,
so.
but if she didn't reapply, she automatically probably indicates that she's on this.
That would suggest so. I mean, I don't think we ever heard such forever. I can't be positive what people's terms were, so I don't know that her term was up right now.
Well, that's in the list of members.
That's why I've asked the Planning Commission to please confirm all that information for us for next
There
meeting.
was a letter from the planning, from planning department. that I know.
What is your point at this time?
Well, it seemed that in this, there was a list of people that had not reapplied and those that reapplied.
Do you need clarity on Debbie's membership right now, or can we wait
Well, I'm
till
just
next?
wondering, why are we not aware of that?
I mean, there's the theory and then there is the actuality, right? So I cannot answer the question as to whether Debbie's a member. Do you need that question answered right now, or can I move on?
Well, if not, then we can kind of strategize a bit, like, do we need a business representative? What could it be? What could we do about that? Right?
Again, strategy and theory are all very well and good.
I mean,
We did not have more
recruitment,
applications.
So it felt in the recruitment. So like, why don't we have young people apply? What can we do to improve that?
I'm sorry, Zana, but the time to deal with recruitment was last fall. The time to deal with recruitment, the time to deal with, recruitment is not at this meeting.
It's on the agenda, it says recruitment.
News, it's an informational update.
So it's recruiting about, informing about recruitment.
It's essentially who has left, who is joining, who is still here, who is not here. I'm just looking for an update on that.
So are we bringing this back next time, and how can we recruit people?
Zana, we've been talking about recruitment for new members for literally the last several months of meeting. So if new people have not shown up for the official application process, which has now concluded as far as the city is concerned, I do not believe that discussing that right now is going to help the process.
Well, I thought it would be good to strategize a bit around the business community.
If you want to try to recruit somebody and get somebody to apply, that would be great. I think we've been doing that for a while now. Thank you.
I'll just make a quick comment from John. He said that Debbie is not a member since she did not reapply as the business representative, and she would have to be appointed from the Planning Commission during one of their meetings to be reappointed as the liaison.
So in that sense, she's off as far as we're concerned. Okay, and is that true for Everett as well? He was a name that was showing up for a while, but he hasn't been in meetings for longer than she has. So.
I'm sure the same thing applies for him since he was also up for reapplication and he did reapply for the Planning Commission,
Okay.
but not as,
Okay,
yeah.
great, thank you. So as far as we're concerned, we have no one from the Planning Commission at present. Okay, just so we know. Thank you for that. All right, Ken, I had a hand up for a moment. I'm not sure if there was more to add on that front. Just want to.
I was just going to say what John said. So that Debbie is not a member now.
Great, thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. All right, next up, items.
Just a comment before you move on.
Yes.
At the last council meeting, we had 3 applicants for the one position for the SCTA committee. And we encouraged the 2 applicants to apply for the CIC.
Okay, great. Thanks
Yeah.
for that. We had been in discussion as to whether the CAC could have open recruitment or not, because what we had previously heard was that the city needed to have applications in by a certain point and that
I
it
see.
couldn't necessarily be open indefinitely. So if that news has changed, that would be of interest to us and that we could continue ongoing recruitment as we understood it, that the applications were supposed to be in December.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little amorphous because the planning director at the meeting said there were still 5 openings.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, perhaps in that case, on the generalized recruitment subject, if we could ask for further clarity from whoever's needed at the city as to whether we can encourage additional applications or whether that is to be considered resolved for this season, that would help us. So, great. Thanks. Phil.
I'm not sure how helpful or unhelpful this is, but I talked to Gavin, which is the new representative for the CA. He got the transportation position, and he's not interested in being a part of the climate action committee. But I'm having a tough time finding Silas's contact or running into him. But I feel like I would like to ask him. I feel like I would like to ask him if you have it. That would be nice. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, I would hope that folks, particularly in transportation, are taking note of Gavin's position and that they can maintain some contact there. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to further clarify that when I did reach out to him, I wanted to reach out and say like, hey, it'd be nice to work in tandem. Like you're meeting and learning things, and it would be great to stay in constant communication. And so if you could inform the climate action committee, that'd be great.
Great. I mean, one of the merits of the working group system is that as long as it doesn't involve a quorum of members on the committee, folks are welcome to meet and correspond on those side subjects as much as possible or as much as they want to. The only official restrictions we have is about deciding whole committee business or discussing it with more than 5 or 6 people at this point. So many of our working groups have relied on contact with people who are not in the committee. And so that's just something to explain to folks who are allies in that respect, that they don't have to actually join the committee if we can just aspire to keep in touch. Excellent, thank you. All right then, moving on again to item number C, which is a letter to the state proposal from Steve Pierce.
Well, hopefully you all have had a chance to look over the packet that we sent. Give a little bit of background on this. We don't build a lot of housing here in Sebastopol every year. I think it's 12 units a year average. And most of these bigger developments are already going all electric, so that's great. And when we looked before as a working group, the energy working group, at could we adopt all electric reach ordinance, we came to the conclusion that it wasn't worth the effort, that it took quite a bit of effort, because every few years as the code cycles change, you have to re-up through all your documentation that everything you're doing is economically justifiable. And it's a pretty big process. It quite honestly requires a city bigger than ours to make it worth it, or you're doing a lot of construction. So here we are, 2024, and the code is going to be changing in 2025 and become mandatory in 2026. It's definitely moving towards heat pumps in the new code cycle, so that's great news. What it is not doing is saying, here is an all-electric path to compliance. It's encouraging heat pumps, but it's not requiring them. So there have been quite a few cities across the state, I think the count is somewhere in the 50s, that have adopted all-electric reach codes. And some have adopted them a bit further. For instance, Berkeley, Petaluma, they have said all new construction has to be electric. And in the process of doing that, Berkeley ended up getting sued by the California Restaurant Association. And that suit is under appeal, but it's kind of held up the process of other cities that have been interested in moving to all electric. So what this letter is, it's kind of mimicking an effort done by 26 other cities that sent a letter out, I think it was September, October, urging the governor and the Building Efficiency Standards Commission to allow all electric reach through the Cal Green building standards. So it's a bit different than the standard traditional Title 24 energy construction standards. We adopted Cal Green here as a city, and there are various levels and tiers of Cal Green. So what this is trying to do is allow cities that are interested in moving to all electric, that may also be fearful of the uncertain legal background that it is in now, to allow them to go to all electric without the onerous issues of both the legal side and the documentation side. It's so much easier to adopt Cal Green. You don't have to have a economically justifiable documentation. Even though the state helps with that process, it's still, for a small city like ours, it would take staff time. So this is kind of following piggyback onto these other 26 cities that have sent out a letter very, very similar to the one that we drafted here. They had a little bit more legalese language in there about the Berkeley suit and how that's impacting things. I felt like that wasn't really paramount for Sebastopol because we're not really looking to do an all-electric reach. This is a way for us to adopt, if we want to, electric building standards without all the baggage that comes associated with it. And I think one interesting thing, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the pack, but I'd like you all to take a look at the graph that was included on page 2. So this was very surprising information that came out from our metrics group. We actually took the PG&E's public data sets and compiled it for the whole county, and we compared all the cities in the county, and lo and behold, we were the worst. Sebastopol has a gas problem. And finally, somebody laughs. There we go. So, we have our work cut out for us, being the worst in the county when it comes to natural gas consumption. The average residential gas consumer uses a lot more than the next highest city, which I think is Sonoma. It's almost like 20% more. And we don't know why that's the case. We have some ideas. We have a more affluent, older housing stock. We have older people that may have turned the thermostat up a bit more too. We don't know. But it's the trend line we don't want to be on. We want to ultimately have a downward trend line on our natural gas consumption. So it's a justification, in my mind, for why we want to pursue electric building standards. New construction is like a no-brainer. It really is. And this allows the city to have that option if the state expands Cal Green and brings in the electrification requirement into Cal Green. So I'm open to any kind of questions that anybody might have.
Great. Thanks very much, Steve, for bringing this forth. And I appreciate you bringing it to our CPA as well. Just a couple of questions about, clarifying the process. You said the code updates in 2025, is that right?
It becomes mandatory in 2026, January 1st, but the cycles started a while ago. It's called the 2025 code. It's a little bit confusing,
Okay.
but it actually is 2026.
Is there a working deadline this year for the letter to get submitted for it to be
I think it needs to be
appropriately actionable?
ASAP. I don't know the internal deliberations behind the scenes. As far as I know, these cities that submitted it the first time around have not gotten a response.
Okay.
So-
And just finally, I noticed your letter, you, for instance, already had it signed by Mayor Diana Rich. And so I'm wondering if you've checked in with her, with city staff, in terms of their sense of the implications of such a letter.
Meaning, is it the whole council or is it the mayor who would sign off on it?
No,
That's
just
a good
meaning
question.
that in the process of putting this proposal, recommending a letter together, have you checked in with staff and checked in
No,
with
I have
Mayor
not.
Rich
I
about
was
it?
hoping
Oh,
that
okay.
Diana Rich would be here today, but we do have the council represented by Councilmember Mauer. And, I'm hoping this will get onto the agenda as soon as possible, not knowing what the timeline is in terms of the state replying to these cities. And it's a pretty extensive list. Santa Cruz, Menlo Park. I can kind of go on and name all these cities that were part of this effort, but
Great, thank
get
you.
the idea.
Do we need to make a pitch for the city? Or what's the next step? Sorry if I'm not catching on fast.
Well, my understanding of the next step is that you all would vote for it, and then we would send it on to the council, and I would contact Diana Rich and see if we can get it onto the agenda soon. To the consent calendar is where these things tend to go. So they'll be lit with a list of other items that the city gives their consent to. Then council members can individually elect to pull that out of the consent calendar, and then it gets brought up, I believe, at the end of the meeting. Is that the way it
That's correct,
works?
yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to vote on supporting the council letter in support of zero emission new construction building standards, that we sign it and get it to council, whatever we need to do to get support for the city.
I second that.
I'd just like to ask a question about procedure here.
Certainly.
Are we asking questions, going out for public comment, coming back and discussing it?
Oh, frankly,
Because-
go ahead. I wasn't expecting a motion just yet. We're certainly open to questions and discussions, and yeah, including public comment.
So at this time, do we only, like, when I'm on council, there's the first period where you only ask questions. So you cannot offer any comments, and you don't, at that time, you wait to hear public comments, and then the motion can happen after that, but
We
So,
we have tended to run a little less formally than that
Okay.
in this committee. I'm not trying to shortcut the process in any fashion,
okay.
though I do want to be sure that there have been ample time for questions and discussion.
So it's okay to discuss at the same time as we're asking questions?
I would say so, yes. Thank
Okay.
you. Are there further questions or discussion?
I have some,
Comments, including yes.
but go ahead. Okay. Well, I want to say thank you for the way you've presented it. I think you've presented it very clearly and thoughtfully, especially in terms of the legal ramifications of the all-electric codes. Anyway, I think you did a great job with that. So do you know, so you said that Sebastopol had adopted the Cal Green building standards. And are there safety codes? I tried to find this online. I was not able to find it. But are there safety codes for exposure to electric or magnetic fields within the Cal Green building standards?
I've never seen anything like that when I've looked at them.
Okay. Because I was injured by electricity back, from indoor wiring. I was living in this house for 6-7 years, and I was injured by the fields from the indoor wiring. So I don't, because of my experience and because I had to literally turn off the electricity. We had faulty, bad wiring, miswiring, and we had bundled wiring. And so we were living with a lot of fields in our house. And so the remedy for that would be to turn it off at the breaker box, which I did, and my health and immune system rebounded. So for me, when I read a letter that makes statements about public health and improving public health and safety, I don't think that's true for everyone because of my own experience and because I ran the EMF safety network for a long time, 14 years, something. I know that there's a lot of people who've been injured by electromagnetic fields. And also in your climate action report, there is a comment in there that you did receive a lot of comments from people wanting to talk about the EMF part. EMF is short for electromagnetic fields. So I'm uncomfortable with it's not just the letter, but it is the letter, the way the letter characterizes the green, the healthy green all-electric direction. And I've had trouble with that for a long time. So it's not just your letter. It's the whole idea of this issue being pushed as the healthy alternative. And I understand that gas, use of gas in homes can be dangerous. But what's not being recognized by the government at this point, the CPUC or any government, is the risk of the electromagnetic field exposure. And so I would not like to see the letter presented for that's my first reason. The second reason is because Sebastopol is a member of Cal Cities, and Cal Cities, they promote local control. So in this situation, the letter is asking for state control rather than local control. So that's the second part. And then the fact that there aren't any safety protocols in any of the building codes is a great concern to me. And for example, if you have like inverters have a really strong not all. There's some that are less and some that are more, but inverters can have a strong magnetic field. You put that on a bedroom and you have a child sleeping in that bedroom, that child could be at greater risk for health problems. And if nobody's, testing for this, and if there's no warning, then how is the public health protected? So I feel terrible bringing this to you. And because I understand that your position on electrification is 100%. And I did go to the CARB website that was mentioned in here, and they did say something that they are working on accessibility issues. And I don't know what those are, but I do know that the U.S. Access Board does recognize people with electromagnetic sensitivities. And there has to be, at some point, some accommodation or recognition that, and I understand it's complicated because it adds this whole nother dimension of complication to it. I mean, the issue with EMF is pretty much just as complicated as the climate action issue is. It's like something Joshua said when we interviewed him for this committee. He said the climate action is multi-tentacled. And that's really similar to what the EMF issue is. So knowing what I know after studying this and studying the peer-reviewed science I found out my health was tanking back in 2006. I remediated it. Within a couple months, my immune system bounced back. In 2007, I was coming to the city council to talk to them about the issue. And I did the EMF safety network. I started in 2010 and I ended it last year when I became a council member. So I do have kind of a pulse on the public's perception of this issue and sort of the inherent problems with the lack of acknowledgement. So the push for electrification is there, but there's a lack of acknowledgement of the potential for harm. So in no way can I feel comfortable calling it clean, green, good for public health. And I'm sorry for that lengthy sort of thing, and I've been dreading this, but there it is. I'm just saying this is, yeah.
There may be other comments standing. Phil, do you want to respond to that?
I had that.
Yeah, I'm actually very grateful to hear that, and thank you for sharing it because I'm not familiar with it, and so it's super key to understand that. And I'm wondering if there's any remedy or like what kind of caveat or what kind of circumstance would it be okay to have the letter advocate for electricity while acknowledging these particular concerns?
I thought about that, and I think it just kind of opens a can of worms. How do you do both? I'm not sure. I don't know how to do that in a simple way.
I mean, do you put an opt out, like if you are concerned about this, or do you feel like people just don't know that they're affected and they could be affected? Or is it just the terminology that you're worried about? And maybe it's more about like, okay, you forget the clean and healthy part, but you add we just keep to the greenhouse emissions part. Was that at all clear, or was that jumbly? But it avoids the health. But it encourages people to go electric, and it somewhat acknowledges that there are issues with going electric.
Well, if I could do it the way I wanted, it would be to ask the state to recognize that there are potential health risks from widely deploying more electricity, because there aren't any safety protocols. There's no acknowledgement that there could be a risk from putting an inverter, for example, or even the smart meters, which thousands of people were complaining about effects they were having because the smart meter was installed. So everything from headaches to ringing in the ears to nausea to, stuff like that, so I think it's complicated. And at this moment, I don't know how to bridge the two.
Okay.
Ideally, it would be great if we could, kind of unwind that and bridge it. And I really appreciate your appreciation. It means a lot to me.
I know we do have a couple other comments lined up. So if I may, I'd like to respond quickly to your point and then recognize and Kenna as well. I respect your experience. I don't want to deny or discount your experience in any respect. For myself, from my perspective, I believe that these are parallel and related issues, but not the same thing. Nobody at this point is suggesting building buildings without electricity in them, right? There's nobody wants, I want my house to be non-electric. So what we're
Except
really
for me.
talking about here, but as you say, there are remedies, right? There's
Yes.
apparently your wiring was bad. One can
Yes.
flip it off of the breaker. My hope would be that the technology and the understanding continues to develop in such a way to protect folks like yourself who have that sensitivity. So I respect that and hope that the technology will catch up. However, I believe that what we're talking about here is the reduction of so-called natural gas being used in hen houses as a central factor, which has strongly documented health risks as well. So I just want to suggest that talking about eliminating natural gas is not quite the same thing as talking about increasing electricity risks. And I know it's nested, but just to me, they're not quite the same subject, if you will. And I just wanted to offer that. But again, Phil's point of, is there a way that language could be included or adapted that would feel better, I think is something that can be taken up. So, okay. Moving on, Zeno, I believe you're next, please.
Yeah, I think we could change the language a bit of the letter. So not emphasize healthy at that time, but just how the goals of greenhouse gas reduction is served by this. But I also think that since this idea about the dangers of electricity and radiation around it is alive in this town, that it makes sense in order to convince the public in general to adopt electrification as a goal, to also have some design around safety. So what are the criteria that we want to add, ideally, to the building code that shields the things Sandra was talking about as much as possible? So that could be a parallel kind of action, but it would still support what we're doing, because we cannot expect in this town to have an enthusiastic adoption of electricity as the only source of energy if we don't address this issue, I think. I had another question. So this is a new construction.
Correct. Only new construction.
Right. And so what is new construction is kind of my question. So for example, the livery bought this building on the corner. They had a pizza place there, but they completely gutted the building and they put in new equipment. Is that new construction, or is that a remodel that is not new construction?
Well, you'd really need the building department official here to say what would end up triggering new construction. My understanding has been that it's usually a % of the envelope of the building that has been modified that kicks it into requiring the new building construction standards. Oftentimes that's like 50%. But hey, don't quote me on this. I'm not sure when it crosses the line for
Right, but
new
it
versus
would be good
remodel.
to kind of clarify that, right, before we bring it forward.
Those are well-established things. that-
Yeah, but if people wonder about it, we need to have an answer, I think.
I'm not sure how this letter would really be impacted one way or the other by that, to tell you the truth. once again, this is the asking the state to allow us. It's not saying the state
No, I
require
understand,
us.
I
It's just if the city wants to adopt it, they could. So it's really all about that. And I understand the issue on EMFs, but this is not the state saying we have to do it this way. It's asking for that possibility to do it that way.
All right, thanks.
Kenna, I see your hand there. Please join us.
Hi. I just first want to say, Sandy, thank you. Like, really, thank you for bringing your real self into this room. It's important that we bring our whole selves into this work. And if we're holding part of ourselves back, we don't do the best work. So I appreciate it on a personal level, but I also appreciate it on a professional level, because I think it's very important that we strive for a no regrets approach to our policy recommendations. And in order to have no regrets around going fully electric, we do need to make sure that we're not causing further harm with that recommendation. So my take on this, and I have to admit, it's been about 12 months since I really tried to dive into the literature on it. But my understanding is that the piece that's missing to build the bridge you're talking about is peer-reviewed literature in the mainstream, especially United States researcher involvement, to elevate the conversation about what are the harms, what is effective mitigation, et cetera. So to me, I think it would be a good compromise to take out maybe the health claim and just talk about greenhouse gas emissions, because that's really clear, and that would be in fact likely in this scenario. But B, to put in a request that the CPUC fund research, or that the state fund research about the health effects of fully electric homes and environments, and that that research be done. If the state's funding it, they're going to funnel it through the UC system, and it's going to rise to a different level in the medical and public health literature. So, and I think it would be well done. So the evidence is siloed at this point, and there's a missing gap of having that evidence, like the recent study that came out about gas being harmful in your home just from having the stove not on. Like, that's really recent. Like, it elevated this conversation within the past 2-3 years about what are the health effects of having gas in your home. So I think it's a very reasonable ask, especially coming from the city of Sebastopol, which has historically really brought the issue of potential health damage from EMFs to the level of policy. I think it would be appropriate to include a paragraph saying, in order to make sure that we are having a no regrets approach, we would like the state to also fund research into potential health effects of fully electric built environment.
Thank you, Kenna. Sunali. I think Steve responded to that.
Yeah, this is not having the state mandate it. It's really us asking for the possibility of having a Cal Green tier, so we can choose whether or not if we want to go all electric. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I thought Sebastopol already passed the Cal Green
Yeah,
building codes.
So we did. We have Cal Green now. So this is asking for a modification to the way the state develops their own Cal Green standards. And it could be a different tier structure. It's really very open-ended to include this as part of CalGreen. It's not saying how or where. And this is once again what those other 26 cities have also signed on to, is give us the flexibility.
Steve, are you saying that CalGreen doesn't currently have a tier about going all electric, and this would bring that into CalGreen as
That's
an
correct.
option?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, I think that, Sandy, I also want to say I appreciate you bringing this up. I think that there's always a lot of complexities with all these things. And I mean, even just, when we have our power off, with storm or for fire or whatever reason. And now there's all these generators going that are burning natural gas but it's the way I see it personally is that natural gas is incredibly harmful to our future on the planet. It's one of the most harmful things we're doing right now, and we can't keep going on this track. We really have to go with cleaner sources. And so between the fracking, the drilling, all the leaking and transport, all the leaking all the time, all the burning, it's just pretty much a disaster. And so right now, things are changing so quickly. When we think of just a few years ago, we didn't have LED light bulbs, and we were using fluorescent light bulbs, compact fluorescents. And so hopefully these issues with the electrical stuff that you're talking about will improve. It sounds like in the case of with your house, there may have been some improper electrical work done. And that's certainly, there's a lot of codes about how electricity has to be handled. That's for sure.
Alex.
So I'm just looking at the letter here to Governor Newsom. Can you state which paragraph or which page the section that inquires about the health? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it.
There's two letters. Right. So.
One's our kind of committee cover letter anytime we bring something.
Mhm.
So that's not what's getting sent to the state, of course. It's the letter to the governor.
Yeah, I think Alex's point is well taken. The focus in the letter to the state is primarily on zero emission. And just a reminder to this committee that our stated aspiration is to move towards net zero by 2030, which is coming up pretty rapidly as such things go.
So I gotta go. Can we vote or?
That is a good question. How about this? Councilmember Marr, are you willing to admit the possibility that the letter, I mean, again, I think a close reading of the letter itself is really called for here. Presuming that some degree of edit or inclusion could be amended to the letter to acknowledge your position, could you, with such a caveat, accept this moving forward in terms of at least moving it towards, given that the city council will discuss it again as well, and that our body is not decision-making, with our emphasis being on reducing emissions. As Steve has already pointed out, very little new construction happens in Sebastopol, and the larger developments already are tending to be all electric. So in many ways, the suggestion that we're making here is going to have a smallish impact on housing stock in Sebastopol. With these, things kind of respecting the point you've brought up, can you see a way for this to move forward?
I think it's a possibility.
Okay.
So just clarifying too, because when we vote, right, that's just the Climate Action Committee's recommendation to take, if we vote and it's approved, we're recommending this letter to be taken to the city council.
That is correct.
Right.
I'll-
Even if Councilmember, with all due respect, opposes what we're voting for and it's declined, she still would have to take it to the council, right? Because if we vote for it, it has to be presented. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. Okay.
Yeah. We are in this motion just recommending that the council consider submitting this letter to the state. That being the case, are folks ready for
Can I,
motions?
so are we going to modify the letter before it goes to the council? or no?
Well, given Steve's point about the timeline on this, I would suggest or offer that perhaps Steve and Sandra could be in touch with respect to that, and that it could be handled in a working group format rather than coming back to full committee for another round of discussion and approval. I just want to acknowledge that the idea that it does take a while to get from here to the council agenda, and that, now that we're monthly meetings, the wheels grind pretty slowly. So I would suggest that if we collectively are in a position to say, we think it's a good idea to try to advance this subject, that perhaps the working group and concerned parties could advance that in a working group format, which is to say fewer than 6 or so people, but that we as a whole do not need to check it again before it tries to get on the agenda for the council. Does that sound reasonable? All right, thanks. Any further discussion or comment before we take a vote on the motion
Did you
to
get public comment?
send the letter? That's what this is now.
Yeah.
We
okay.
have, one member of the public who I don't recognize, who's certainly welcome to weigh in, but any,
I just have a question. Am I allowed to, did you guys decide if I'm allowed to vote today?
I don't think we need your vote to make a
Okay.
quorum. So we're certainly interested in your and Emmett's positions, but technically speaking, I don't know if your vote counts, but I don't think it matters, or it's not a critical issue at this time. Thank you. All right.
So Alex made a motion earlier. You guys continuing? Are you going to use that motion that he made earlier?
I believe we are in a place of continuing the motion, which is essentially recommending that this letter with some potential edits to be worked out on the side advance to try to get into the city council agenda, at which point the city council could debate and decide as they will. Okay. All right. Could we do a roll call vote on this, if you please?
Alex?
How do I say? What do I say? In favor or?
Yes or no?
Yes.
All right.
That works. Phil?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Josh? Joe?
Yes, please.
Zeno?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Why don't we check in with McKenna and Emmett as a matter of
So
course?
they have to make a statement before being allowed to vote at the
Oh.
beginning of the meeting?
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm not going to use my just cause because we don't need me to, but I am also in favor.
Yeah, and I can echo that. I appreciate all the thoughtful discussion around this, and I support this, and I won't use my official vote. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and discussion.
Thank you all for
and
the
realness.
information
Thanks,
discussion
Alex.
today.
Good
Thank
to
you.
see you.
That was 6 ayes and a few absent. And no no's.
Us too. All right, there we are. Thanks, everyone. Let's finally get back to that regular agenda. All right, the next subject is kind of a big one, frankly. We had considered that this meeting might be one that needed a little bit extra time. I'm sort of hoping to avoid that if we can. But this next subject about the work plan development, again, we're just trying to refine, clarify, and zoom in on what we feel our tasks as a committee are for this year, and in particular, the next couple of seasons. And in kind of our strategic steering meetings with city staff and council staff, we've come to this place where frankly, the city is strapped for resources this year, and in terms of staffing, in terms of budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. And we were advised that one of the ways we could be most helpful and have the most oomph is if our work plan has some alignment and some connection to the planning department and the planning commission work plan. So we were encouraged to look at the planning commission / planning department work plan and see which ways our aspirations might align and mesh with that or defer. Our intent today is to just examine that, to compare our work plan, our aspirations, both personal and within working group and a committee as a whole, and see how that does and doesn't connect with the planning commission work plan, and see if we can find a way forward that would just be a little bit more aligned. Something else I want to throw in just as a consideration with respect to our work plan planning is that we have gotten a little bit atomized over the last year or two since the sort of climate action framework was completed. And so there are some cases where it's kind of one or two of us trying to move a certain agenda forward. And just it might help us now and then to tag team things a little bit more. And so I would sort of suggest that when folks think they have a worthy project, but they know that they themselves will not be able to move it forward all that quickly, that we kind of institute a practice of bringing that project to the committee, saying, hey, you guys, I could really use a little extra help. I think this has merit because of this, this, and this. Can somebody pitch in for, some finite period of time to try to advance these worthy projects, as it were? So without further ado, I kind of just wanted to open up the floor. What I saw was that the Planning Commission work plan had really clear resonance with some working group goals, particularly things like transportation and to some extent energy and buildings. And there was also a rights of nature piece in there. But just in general, what did people see? What are your thoughts, questions, concerns about this process going forward? Phil, please.
So I'm extremely pleased to see what I see on the planning working group as part of the transportation committee. The vehicle miles traveled grant to see what exactly that number is helps with metrics. And that's a number that I'm, worried about as far as like, what are we doing as far as, electrifying our cars to drive. So that's pretty critical. And then also I was fairly excited to see the grant for the new highway thought, and I'm excited to see that. But then also we didn't hire, I don't know there's a citizen representative for the Sonoma County, what is that? The Transportation Authority. And I think that's just amazing. So all three of those align significantly with projects that we've already got going and shouldn't affect or impact any economic zone.
Excellent. Please.
You mentioned a new grant. Can you say more about what that is?
There's a grant to study the vehicle miles traveled, and there is also a sustainability grant to study the main highways and how they go through downtown in an effort to make them more bikeable.
That's item 3B.
3B.
It's the planning.
Page 1.
commission
I think
work
it's
plan.
page 1, yes.
If you're looking at the horizontal format one, you're on the committee work plan. We're looking at the planning commission work plan.
I think you may have only the work plan.
And I don't know who applied for these grants, but I'm actually kind of curious to know who and how we might work with the people that are already trying to discover the vehicle miles traveled methodology.
I
I'm
have a
pretty,
question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in the planning commission work plan, some of the items are in the past, 2023. So my question is, have these items been finalized? So like vehicle mile travels says summer, fall 2023. Is that finalized, that part of the work plan, or is it still active?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out.
Yeah, point well taken. Item number 2 there on the VMT says summer to fall 2023, but doesn't say if it's been resolved. So I think we would want an answer on that.
And the ordinance at the top, there's an ordinance. It also says fall, winter 2023. Is that scheduled to be discussed or is that already discussed?
Which ordinance are you talking about?
And
What
the
amendment?
first item.
Number 1? About the design standards?
I didn't receive that in the email for the CAC meeting.
No, it was
It was sent-
included
it was
in,
sent the week before.
when your show says.
It was sent a week ahead of time and then it was mentioned
Finalize the
again.
agenda early and that, it was an attachment and that.
And that came out of our meeting with you and Diana back in December.
Okay, so it was sent a while back.
Yeah.
I have it. I just didn't realize it was part of this meeting.
Okay.
So it would be good to discuss this if the liaison with the planning commission is actually here. Because this is a coordination thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be good to hear from them what their plans are, how we can be helpful. We could explain certain perspectives that we have ourselves, like fecal mouth travels,
Mm-hmm.
had to do with employment in town, right? So a climate approach to vehicle mouth travel would both look at housing and at work opportunities in town. You just don't build housing as such, but you want to balance that with work for the people that living there or in some way connected, rather than silo each of these decisions. So it would be good to have this planning, chair of the planning commission present to discuss it.
Yes, we've been saying that for seasons now. Trust me, it's an issue. There is an item in here, which is on page 8, which is talking about aspiring to planning commission, city council joint meetings regularly. And that's one place where I would suggest that our committee is included as well for exactly that same reason, for proactive dialogue and input. Frankly, the planning commission liaison has been unresolved, as mentioned, for multiple seasons now, and we're trying to figure out how to get a workaround on that. But if we have something actively to contribute to these particular items that they've taken on, I think that will help our case tremendously.
So who suggested to align us with the planning commission?
This was in discussion with Diana and Sandra.
So maybe she must have some ideas about how she likes to see that.
This is the start where we review the work plans and see what makes sense. So there are certainly direct connections, as I mentioned, most of these direct connections are related to transportation, with some of it related to energy and buildings. There's
Well, like the
little
hazard
bit of environmental
mitigation
stuff.
plan, the hazard mitigation plan falls under adaptation in climate work, right? Flooding, fires, adaptation. So we want to, if there's a hazard plan, we'd like to have that reviewed by work groups that deal with these issues here.
The framing on the local hazard mitigation is mostly about disaster preparedness. And
I know,
so,
but
given that we do not have a group that is working on that, I'm not sure how that would be pursued.
well, it is part of climate work to think about adaptation, right? So if we don't do that, maybe we should look into that.
It's a person power thing, frankly. Well, I'm surprised, frankly, that our discussion is so mellow so far. I guess there's a couple other ways to.
I had a
this.
comment. In terms of the objective design standards, those have been approved. I guess it says right there anyway. And then the vehicle miles traveled thresholds, that's also been completed.
So what are the potential mitigation that have been accepted
Mitigation for what?
for increase in field about travel? So you normally, it's something you want to avoid, so you mitigate it. So it's in the last line of this project, right?
Yeah,
Potential mitigation.
we did not discuss any mitigations. We just approved the vehicle miles travel body of work that had been completed. And honestly, I don't recall any potential mitigations.
Is it available for us to look at? Just to know what the numbers are?
I got to figure out when that was on the agenda, vehicles miles travel. I'll look and see when that was on the agenda. I can do that right now.
Because it's great for a baseline, because in a few years, if you want to look back and see if that's improved.
Okay.
Yeah, as I see it here, it's about defining standard as opposed to.
Oh, just a standard, not a number. My fault.
Uh,
But still, if the standard is known, then we can also use that.
developing metrics and thresholds. So yeah, it becomes a benchmark. That's it. But Zeno, I think your point about exploring the mitigation standpoint is well taken and should be pursued, certainly. Steve, you have something?
A few things on the VMT. My understanding was that was more of a methodology to deal with proposed developments to see what their VMT impact is. It's not like an overall VMT number for the city or anything like that. It was a tool that the city was adopting for use on development analysis.
Thanks.
From the last RCPA meeting, we found out that Measure M money, we would need a 15% city match to be eligible. I think you, Joshua and Zeno, you were there. And quite honestly, I think the city had to recently give up some grant opportunity because they couldn't make a match. And I'm trying to think how we're going to get that going forward, because the Measure M money is some big time money, and we may be have the taxation without the benefits when it comes to our local town for the Measure M. And that's pretty concerning. I don't know how much 15%, you have to competitively apply for the monies for Measure M. And if we can't even come up with the 15%, why even bother applying for things unless we can somehow get a grant? So that kind of gets me to the next topic here, our grant writer. So we worked hard, city hired a grant writer. And what my understanding is that the grant writer, the one and only grant that they were able to get, maybe Zuzi, you have some more information on that, was that sustainability grant, the $200,000. They helped secure that for Main Street. Now, unfortunately, this grant, the way it was structured for the city to spend this $200,000, they were looking at various options: widening the sidewalk along Main Street, getting rid of some parking on Main Street, slowing the speeds on Main Street, and then the big kahuna, which is the two-way traffic. And instead of letting the process determine the priority, the Planning Commission and then the city, which really didn't look at it, said that, yes, the two-way traffic has to be one of these things that the city will examine as part of the $200,000. And quite honestly, my concern is it's going to suck most of that 200 grand into the engineering studies for something that the town voted in 1984 to reject. It was probably the most contentious issue in the history of our town. And there was no discussion about that at the council level. It was on the consent calendar, boom, we're doing it. And that one is a priority. There are certain people in town that do want to see this advance, the 2/8 street, but there's a lot of people that have no idea that the city is looking at doing this again. And there are all sorts of safety issues that came about What they found, they did studies after we moved to a one-way traffic, big reductions in traffic accidents. And no acknowledgement amongst the planning commission or the city council that, hey, we're actually starting this process, spending 200 grand on something that our citizens may not even want. And here it's all under the guise of sustainability. And I think that it's going to open up a whole kettle of fish, and it could have been money that was directed and spent in ways that would attract people to downtown without all the controversy and hubbub about changing our traffic flow. It's got a long and storied history behind it, and the two-way traffic issue. And I don't think the city knows what they even approved when it came to this grant. So 200 grand is a lot of money for the city on this downtown issue. And it's probably too late at this point because they already said that has to be one of the things we look at. So here I am concerned on multiple fronts that one, we don't have the money to do the match on Measure M. Even if there were low-hanging fruit things on our active transportation plan, we may not be able to afford to do it. And then two, here we are, the biggest expenditure for sustainability, and it may just take us down the wrong path when it comes to two-way streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Phil.
Having not lived here, I just want to sit here and listen to the whole story now. I feel like there's a lot going on. But that said, is there any way for us to get involved with the planning commission's dispense of the $200,000 or like micromanage it somehow? I'm sure they wouldn't like that.
Just
That's a good question. And do you have a comment?
when it comes up on the council, then you can come and comment and participate that way. In fact, that might be something that if you wanted to bring forward a letter from the Climate Action Committee regarding what you'd like them to do with that $200,000 grant, the Climate Action Committee could come up with a letter with that statement of how what do you want to see happen with this 200,000 and send that, to council. My recollection of that is that we didn't, I don't think it wasn't on the regular calendar.
on
I
the
think it was on
consent
consent and the two-way streets was one of a lot of different things. So that wasn't the only issue
No,
on
but
there,
it said that it had to be one of the things that is examined. And
The
that's my
only-
concern. I'm not saying
Yeah,
it shouldn't be
I'm not
examined.
sure why that is because the council didn't discuss it.
No.
Maybe we could just wind it back and say, well, it can only be like 10% of the
Yeah,
outlay or something like that. Just limit its exposure.
or you just express your concerns that it will use up the whole grant, and that's certainly not a good use of the grant money.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything Steve just said. It was so unfortunate that that was the only thing that was required is the two-way street thing. And I think that it's a big can of worms. And I think to call turning this Main Street into a two-way street as a sustainability thing is highly questionable. I don't think we can call it sustainability. It's a whole complicated issue that climate-wise, I don't think it's doing us any favors at all. So that was really unfortunate.
There was a whole public process on reimagining the downtown 10 years ago, too, that brought in design professionals, including a traffic engineer from all around the country and public charrettes and that whole thing, and
Oh, yeah.
looked all this for much less than $200,000 not that long ago. So my concern would be, it's just another study that doesn't get teeth, that is just ignoring the history of the question. So,
Well, there's things that are far less controversial, like widening the sidewalks in certain spots or taking away limited parking on Main Street, that kind of thing that would be way less costly and way less controversial. That so those things were not required. The only thing that was required was the two-way street. So I would love the idea of somehow putting together a letter that I don't know whether this committee would have any sway at all, but just to acknowledge that we think there are more important issues regarding sustainability than that.
Great.
So, I mean, I could work on that.
Question.
Sounds awesome. I'd like to acknowledge that Kenna's had her hand up for a long while, so if y'all don't mind, I want to check in with her. Kenna, do you have something?
Yeah, sorry. I was about to text you and be like, my hand is up. Yeah, a few things. I'm trying to go back in my mind. One is way back to the local hazard mitigation plan piece. We were asked to review the last time it was coming out. I believe I was the only person that took that on to provide comment. I have learned a lot more about local hazard mitigation plans. I do feel very strongly that there is a role for this committee in reviewing the local hazard mitigation plan and having climate input. So I would definitely be willing to review the plan again and bring a report on that to the committee. Second, Sunali had to leave, but she asked me to pass on a few talking points. One being kind of support for Joshua's statement that, if we worked more as groups, if we had less projects and more support for the projects that we have, she felt like that would be a very good way forward for this committee. And that one of those projects should be the recruitment that Zeno brought up, and that Joshua has been talking about for a long time, that we work on recruitment together and work on really leaning into diversity, because we have lost the only voting person of color, I believe, in the group right now. So those were Sonali's comments. I'm trying to go chronologically here. Then to one you guys were talking about more recently, I think that a letter advising what we do think the money should be used for is a really good idea. That is exactly our role and exactly what we should be doing. And I would be willing to set some time aside to help with that, Lisa, and whoever else wants to take that on. So I'm sure there was other things that I forgot, but I will raise my hand again if I remember that.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for that,
Kenna.
Kenna.
Could you repeat the last thing about that?
Could you repeat your last point, Kenna?
About the letter, I was just voicing support for Lisa's, I was voicing support for helping Lisa and whoever else wants to write a letter advising, it's like saying what we think the money should go for, the grant money should go for. If it is sustainability, that I feel like that's exactly what our role is, to make a statement about what we think the money should go for. And that we should make that a priority.
Great. Thanks, Kenna.
So I have to-
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, so it's a transportation working group topic, right? So I
What
appreciate
is-
you guys to write this letter about this active transportation grant. I appreciate it. You want to step up, but make sure that you involve Emmett and me and Philip in how you phrase it. The other question I had, so this is a grant from Caltrans. Is the city going to hire a consultant, or is Caltrans doing the work and paying itself for this project? And where is it right now?
I see John has his hands up. I think he might be able to add some clarification on that.
John Jay in the house.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the Sustainable Transportation Grant went out for a RFP a few months ago. We did get 3 consultants apply for the grant. We are in the process of selecting one of those 3 consultants who will then do the work. And a lot of the criteria that we look at is based off of the knowledge of the grant, how they work with public participation, and amongst other things. But of course, you know, the group's kind of input into the process is always helpful. I don't think we're at a point where we can kind of go back and revise the language of what the grant looks at, unfortunately. But you know, the two-way street, like Steve mentioned, was part of one of the things that was included in there. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the ultimate kind of turnout of the way that Main Street is looked at. It's just one of the options for the grant writers and I mean, not grant writers, but the consultants to look at. And then it'll also have a public participation part of it. So when those things kind of move forward, I'll be sure to let this group know, and then anybody else that's interested in our updates to the, you know, our planning department updates. And then also if we have any other updates on the city website, so that you all can be properly informed of where it's at.
So
And
can I-
happy to answer any other questions if you need.
Yeah, I wonder, did Caltrans put pressure on Sebastopol to include a two-way option in the grant proposal?
Not that I'm aware of, Zeno.
I mean, where did this come from?
I don't know. I wasn't one of the ones that was involved with putting the grant documentation or what the grant included. But I believe it was just one of the options that the city wanted to look at as a possibility.
I think there's a small number of people who have been pushing for this for years. Yeah, so anyway, there's a lot of history about it.
They have a name and there's a group, and I can't remember the name.
Well, that's a new group, but
No, it's been going on. I think we're thinking about the same group.
there's one person who's been pushing for it for about over 20 years, so.
Mhm.
Folks, if I may facilitate for a moment here, just a reminder that today is not our goal to zoom into incredible detail on each of the points that are on there. So if we can reflect in terms of strategic action, I think we have a course of work going on here where folks are developing impetus to write a letter and find a way to submit that, which sounds great and like a worthy action item. By my count, our current number of members here is 10 official committee members. So just a reminder that offline working groups can have up to 5 official committee members, but not more than that. If you're including bouncing emails on drafting from one to the other in a chain. So just a little bit of caution as folks say, oh, I went in on that letter too. And some of you might consider, I don't know if there's a format for recusing yourself as part of the process, but just pay a little attention on this subject to the quorum.
If we wanted to send out a draft of a letter with the transportation working group, would it be okay if we CC'd everybody on the committee? And that way,
No,
but it would not be okay.
no.
You have to send it through the planning department to send anything to all of us. And it
Okay.
would have to be
Okay, thank you
posted
for,
publicly if it was something that we're considering.
so then are there suggestions for how many people can we involve with the letter?
Up to 5
Up to 5.
official committee members.
Okay,
Regarding the transportation group, if you just sent it to Zeno, I think that would be good. And he could, bounce things off of
Okay.
us if necessary.
Thanks. Kenna, did you have something else to, yeah?
Yes, I just wanted to ask John a question of clarification. So we're past RFP stage. You have a contract with the preferred vendor in process, is my understanding. And if that's true, then can we get a copy of that contract once it's executed or finalized?
So we have not selected a consultant yet. We received 3 separate applications for the grant, which we have a process to go through to then select or award that specific consultant. Once that is finalized, then I do believe it becomes a public record document that we can share with the group as far as like what the scope of the project is and all that kind of stuff.
And just for us to understand what we're talking about, is the RFP available on the city website, or would you send us a copy of that so we have an understanding of what's in process or what's in development?
Yeah, the RFP should have been, it's part of one of the documents that we have to post on the website. So it should be somewhere on there. Zuzi, I think if you're able to find that and send that out to the group, I think that would be probably the quickest and easiest way.
And I have a question too, John. How is this selection process going to work? Like, who will be deciding?
It's the city. City staff is the selection group. But like I said, we have a kind of matrix criteria on how we select consultants based on projects and such. So we award them on specific points. It's kind of a point grading scale on how well we feel that their proposal meets the criteria of the grant and what we want to see as a city.
Okay, thanks.
Can you maybe be more explicit about the playing room that there still is? Like, is it just everything is set in stone already, or is there still some ability to move things around a bit here?
As far as the scope of the project goes, that's already past the point of changing anything as we've received things, but there's also a point in time that I believe we can make amendments to the scope of work or have the consultant look at specific criteria points that either the climate action group wants to see or the transportation group wants to see. But at this point in time, we can't make any changes to the scope of work or RFP that was already sent out. So we're stuck in that aspect of we have to select a consultant, and then during the kind of negotiation phase, there are some things that we can modify or change to an extent that doesn't completely negate what the proposed scope was.
So can we approach petition Caltrans to have the condition modified at all? Maybe,
no, it's already
unusual, but maybe unusual, hasn't happened before, but could be tried.
that I'm not aware of it that being part of the process. So I don't think we have the ability to do such that you're asking, Zeno.
I'm sorry, folks. I feel that we're running out of time and I need to step in and sort of wrap up discussion on this specific item, which was not part of our agenda per se. But let's remember that this is a grant to study a situation, and we are invited as the committee to inform that study and communicate our priorities. We have a plan to do so. I would suggest that we're good for now. Yeah. Thank you.
So I have 2 other suggestions for work plan, or do you want to just let?
Work plan stuff. Yeah. by
Work
all
plan,
means.
okay.
Thank you.
Well, this is a real long shot, but this has been on the city's agenda for probably 40 years, the bypass. So I'm just throwing that out there. If anybody interested, talk to me about the bypass.
Is that on?
I do
planning
not think
commission?
it's on there, so it's just sort of outside of
Okay, if it's not on the planning commission work plan, it is definitely out of our scope for consideration this season.
The second issue is zero waste issues around the garbage. And zero waste is mentioned in the work plan for the Planning Commission, but not this specific issue. So I'll just tell you about the problem. And again, if anyone's interested in this, it's a complicated problem. All the garbage counts downtown, they have garbage, they have recycling, and all of that goes straight into the trash. So it doesn't get divided up, and it's a problem. And so it's a problem that needs, some attention on how do we resolve that problem. Maybe it's not resolvable, but that was just another issue that I thought the Climate Action Committee could potentially look at.
All right. Unfortunately, our Zero West point person is absent today, but I would encourage bringing that to suggestion to her as well, since it's right up her alley. I did want to also highlight that the Rights of Nature Ordinance is on the Planning Commission work plan there.
And we'll be
It's-
bringing that back probably later in the year.
Okay, great.
Because it's
Yeah,
not
since-
on this year's plan, but it is still in there. It's still
Yeah,
in
it's
there.
sort of in the addendum section, but
Yeah.
I did want to acknowledge that a working group here has been addressing that. Given that Sunali has retired, Sandra, you're kind of the surviving,
Right.
at least committee member of that, so you feel that is still happening.
Yes.
Along the way. All right, definitely want to encourage that. Okay, folks, I'd like to acknowledge that we are essentially out of time here. I don't want to cut us off completely, but I also don't want to drag on too much further. We have learned some things from our examination of the various work plans. One easy thing to suggest is that previously, as a committee, we have been encouraged to cite sections of, for instance, the city general plan when we're bringing a proposal forward to the city. We say, so this is supported by these priorities within the general plan, therefore, it's not just me making something up that I think is cool. With respect to that, things that we're doing that we can align with parts of this Planning Commission work plan, some obvious, some perhaps less obvious, I think will also help our case in the future. And so it behooves us to be strategic about sort of our citations of building up the momentum for our priorities, and also to, again, look at the specific allies, for instance, Gavin on the SCTA committee, and also finding the folks within the Planning Commission. The elephant in the room, or not in the room, of course, is we're still trying to find a way to have an effective liaison with the Planning Commission. Your co-chairs as such will keep trying to figure out how that happens with support from city staff as much as we can work that out. And that definitely it remains a goal to mesh our work more closely with the Planning Commission so that we're in these discussions upfront rather than kind of after the fact. So those things being the case, my understanding is that we all do have stuff that we're working on, and that I think we can continue to bring that forward. And so these are essentially strategies for how we advance the things that we're working on by connecting them a little bit further on. The remaining items on the agenda were chair reports, RCPA updates. I'm inclined to go ahead and slip past that one. I don't know of any burning items that are there. I know some of us are definitely tracking RCPA and trying to mesh with that, particularly in places where they're doing efforts that we can piggyback on rather than duplicate. Input from members regarding the next meeting agenda would be the next little bit. I do have the Vision Zero piece there. We also have the letter about the Sustainable Transportation Grant, I think is, hopefully another thing we'll take up next month. Anything else that comes to mind for folks in terms of something we should do for the next agenda? Yeah, please.
Do you want us, I will reach out to Steve and work on the letter. We'll see what we can come up with, making some minor edits to the letter.
Oh, great. Yeah,
And then do you want us to bring it back, or do you want?
The committee has approved that
Have approved it,
advances to
okay.
council.
So it can just go-
So yeah,
Okay.
that would be great to go ahead and move that forward. So anything else I'm missing? Thanks again for being here and powering
Thank
on
you.
through.
Thank
Look
you,
forward to
Joshua.
seeing you in March, and feel free to be in touch as long as you don't email all of us at the same moment. We're good. All right, take care, y'all.
Recording stopped.
I feel like